You're here with Dr. Deem from Christie Clinic talking about something that's a really relevant topic. The last few days have just been scorchers, so we're going to talk about heat exhaustion, right?
Yeah, it has been kind of a weird May, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been
hot.
Like 102-degree heat index yesterday. It was awful. So let's talk about this.
Yeah.
There's a difference between just being like, oh my gosh, it's hot outside, and suffering from heat exhaustion. So how do we know?
Yeah, so heat exhaustion, heat stroke, it's very serious. It's a medical emergency, and the biggest time that we see this is this time of year, when it's very hot, and more importantly, when it's very humid. Because the way that we can control our body temperature is the ability to sweat. So if we sweat, that's the way that we dissipate heat. And when it's very humid outside, basically the moisture is so high in the air that we're not able to effectively sweat. And so if everybody's ever been to Las Vegas, it's always a lot hotter here than it is there. But people are able to cool themselves off, and it doesn't feel like 110 degrees there because their humidity is really a lot lower than what we see here in Central Illinois.
You're sweating like you're supposed to be there.
Correct. So heat exhaustion, heat stroke, very dangerous. It's kind of an emergency. I think the most relevant thing that we need to talk about here is we see this a lot in the elderly, and we see this a lot in children, and the big problem and the #1 cause is usually accidents, and we always worry about parents with children. So parents are taking their kids to daycare, normal routine, forgot the kid in the back seat, left him in the car. It happens.
Unfortunately, it does. We've seen too many news stories where
correct.
That's been the case.
Not on purpose, but it happens, and that's the one thing that we want to try and avoid. So I urge parents, if you're going somewhere, put your purse in your back seat, put something in the back seat to remind you to look back there to make sure that your kids are there. Try to never leave a kid in the car unattended. And heat exhaustion can occur in animals too in the car. So I mean, you want to make sure to never leave them alone, and it can occur within 5 minutes. So you definitely want to just make sure that you're not forgetting your kiddos there. But elderly at risk, and then of course athletes that are exerting themselves in the heat. So the signs of heat stroke or heat exhaustion, it's not always clear cut, but usually we define it as a temperature of up to 40 degrees Celsius, which is 105 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's really high. So normal body temperature is anywhere from 96 to 98.6 degrees, somewhere in there. So significant elevation in temperature. And then usually the victim will start acting confused. They're just really not making sense. Their skin might be kind of actually cool to the touch and rather damp. They might not actually feel warm. And then, of course, like when it gets really far down the road, when it's starting to get too late, I mean, the victim can have a seizure. Victim can damage their muscles.
All kinds of not so fun things can happen.
Very serious.
Yeah.
So
how do we fight this? If you have to be outside, whether it's by choice, you're doing something fun, or you've got work to do, what do you do to make sure you don't start going downhill?
So if it's very hot and very humid and you have to be outside, I think it's important to take breaks, seek areas with shade, every 20 minutes or so. If you start to feel overheated, I think that's a sign that you need to get inside and get cooled down or get in the shade. And sometimes, unfortunately, the victim might not know that they're having heat stroke because, again, like when the body temperature gets so elevated, our enzymes, our proteins in our bloodstream, they don't operate well, and so they're really not aware of what's going on. So if you're seeing somebody out there that looks like they're having heat exhaustion or having heat stroke, the most important thing is to get them inside and get them cool. And let's talk about those measures. So remove the clothing, okay? So the most clothes that you can remove for them, get them completely naked. The more surface area you have to exchange heat with the environment, good thing. Putting them in a cold shower. If you don't have access to that, wet towels, or soaking them off simply with a garden hose. And then if you really think somebody has heat exhaustion or heat stroke, that's a medical emergency. You call 911, but you make sure you start getting them cooled first.
Gotcha. Definitely something important to remember during these summer months. And we need to be mindful of this about when it gets up to 100 degrees outside, would you say?
I think it's not necessarily always the heat issue. Again, it's the humidity issue as well. So when it's very hot and humid on days like we've been having, that's where we really need to be watching.
Absolutely. Very timely topic, especially with the high temperatures that we've seen and will continue to see this week. Dr. Deem, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be right back after this.